Going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are going over the latest on the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is one of the big storylines heading into this the offseason of the NHL this year. Sidney Crosby, Kris Letang, and Evgeni Malkin. They've been together for 16 seasons in Pittsburgh. But this might be the final time. This might have been the final season that these three players are together in the National Hockey League, as both Evgeni Malkin and Kris Letang are up for new contracts this year. And we've continued to get updates on terms of, is there an extension close? Are they willing to leave Pittsburgh? What's the mindset around the organization in terms of what do they think of returning these guys? The window, it has the window closed, and I think we're going to find out a lot about that this summer. So we're going to start off with some positive news, and that is that they did end up re-signing Bryan Rust. You could pretty much have, he was going to Detroit. I mean, he was going to be a member of the Detroit Red Wings from Pontiac, Michigan. It made complete sense that Bryan Rust, if he was not a member of the Penguins, was probably going to head back to his hometown in Detroit. But they don't have to worry about that anymore. He's going to stay with the organization, and it might be leading us toward what we're seeing now in terms of Malkin and Letang, because that's less money now to re-sign those two players. That's $5.5 million just slid right out. So that's going to make things more difficult for re-signing those players. So we're going to start off with Big Gino first. So the latest on Evgeni Malkin with the Penguins. This is from Danny Sinray. Evgeni Malkin wants to stay in Pittsburgh, so that sounds good, but is prepared to move if needed. Truthfully, I think it's going to come down to, what does he think about playing in Russia? Does he want to go back to Russia? Because that's always something that gets brought up, guys. We saw Kovalchuk do that a couple of times. Does he want to go play in the KHL? Does he want to play in Florida for the Florida Panthers, right? I think that would be quite difficult, but, again, if the problem is I see with the Florida teams is because he has a house in Florida and everybody assumes he wants to play for the Panthers or Lightning. They don't have the cap space, neither of those teams, and the problem is if you're looking for money, if you're not worried about money, you might as well stay in Pittsburgh. And that's why I think at that rate, it would just come down to just staying in Pittsburgh. It makes more sense at that point. So if I'm going to say between Malkin and Letang, who's more likely to stay? Based off of this stuff, I do think it is Malkin. But in terms of the organization, I think they are putting more emphasis on re-signing Kris Letang, more so than Evgeni Malkin. So it's kind of one of those things where the priorities for each side is a little bit different, and I think that could end up being a problem where we could see a scenario where both of them don't return to Pittsburgh. So this is the latest on Kris Letang, and this is from Elliot Friedman. The Penguins last offered Kris Letang a 4-year deal at a little under $7.5 million per season. That's not a small chunk of change. I mean, considering his current contract that he's had, he signed a mega contract almost a decade ago with the Pittsburgh Penguins that he's on the final year of. Yeah, so it's 7.25, so it's slightly less than what he got. It was an 8-year, $58 million contract on July 1st of 2013. Wow, time has flown by. But looking at what you're what we're looking at with Letang is he still thinks he's worth $7.5–8 million per year, and that's a lot of money. And the problem with Letang, and Penguins fans will definitely tell you, he is a liability as a defenseman. His point production is great. He scores lots of points. He's in terms of a point producing defenseman, far and away, he definitely is toward the top of the pack. The problem, though, is his defensive capabilities, and that's one of the reasons that I think the Penguins are a little bit weary of giving him $7.5, maybe even $8 million, even on a 4-year deal. That's still a lot of money. And yeah, look, I mean, Kris Letang played 78 games this season, As a defenseman, he was third in the team in points, 68 points this season, which is just incredible. So when you look at just how good Letang has been, that is something to consider. Now, here's another interesting thing as Evgeni Malkin, the Malkin situation, he played 41 games this season for the Penguins, and he put up 42 points. But he only played half the season. He had an injury down the stretch, and he was out for a significant amount of time. So now when you're signing to a guy to a 3-4 year deal in Malkin, you kind of run the risk of, is he even going to be healthy most of those games? He's one of the very few players on this team with a minus. He's a -10 this season. He actually has the lowest plus-minus on the Pittsburgh Penguins, which is kind of bad. I mean, everybody else is like a -1, -2, and then Malkin, who is a -10. So you know that the Penguins will use that against him. But like I said, with Malkin, it's one of those things that I don't think they want to consider losing him, but I think they're more focused on Letang right now. But in terms of Letang, I think he is more willing to leave. I think Letang is more looking at, listen, teams out there have the money, and I want to go play there. Now, I think the Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Canadiens will definitely be at the forefront, a little closer to home for Kris Letang, and I think that is something you have to consider. A lot of people get mad at me. They're like, oh, of course, you always say the French-Canadian guys want to go back to Canada. Yeah, but a lot of them grew up in that Montreal, Quebec City area, so if they do want to move closer to home, just like Brian Rust would want to move back to Pontiac, Michigan, which is not far from Detroit. It's the same concept. It's just there's a lot of French-Canadian hockey players. That's how this works, guys. So I could see a real scenario where, Letang does leave. Again, if you're looking at Malkin leaving, where would he even go to, right? Because you'd consider the Florida teams, but they're not going to have the money. So if he's going to take a $3 million contract, he might as well either go to the KHL or stay in Pittsburgh for a little bit more. So I think that's where the Penguins, forward is going to have a real, he's going to really have to figure out what he wants, and based off of what, will he be flexible enough with the Penguins management in terms of what they can do in terms of an extension? Because, guys, you remember, Sidney Crosby has 3 more years left on his contract. So, ideally, the cup window is until those 3 years from now. So, I mean, it sounds, some of you may laugh when I say the cup window is another 3 years, but that's ideally what you're looking at here for the Penguins. Now, with that said, we've also heard some reports about Ricard Raquel. Now, Raquel did not play a lot in this year's playoffs. He got busted up in Game 1 against the Rangers and did not return for the remainder of this series. But there has been some talk that Ricard Raquel could stick around in Pittsburgh. So this is from Chris Adamski. Ricard Raquel is open to signing a new contract with the Penguins this offseason. I think that's a really good thing for them if he were to return. I think he's one of those really good forwards. He's definitely not the high-flying goal scorer he was in, say, 18-19, but he's still been a pretty good hockey player. And I think the Penguins, again, when you consider if they do lose guys like Malkin and Rodriguez and guys like Denton Heinen this summer, you need some center depth. You bring in Brian Rust, you keep Ricard Raquel, and I think they could keep this thing a little bit, in the right direction for the next couple of seasons, despite all the potential losses on the table. With that said, we've continued to hear more reports and rumors about Marc-Andre Fleury. It does sound like he is very interested in returning to the Steel City to finish out his NHL career. He's definitely going to play one more season at the National Hockey League level, and we'll kind of see what happens from there. So guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Between Kris Letang and Evgeni Malkin, which one of these guys, what do you think their future is? Do you think Malkin stays? Do you think Letang stays? Do you think they both stay? Do you think they both leave, right? Let me know what you guys think. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.